Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and this video is titled The Amazing Story of Captain Bill Norwood. Now, I put this together quite a while ago and I kind of sat on it. Initially, I got a lot of comments on some of my posts about DEI. I had to look that up. I didn't even know what that was. But you might notice here, Bill's black. Okay, you can tell that from the picture. And Bill was the first black pilot hired by United Airlines, and he was also one of the very first captains I flew with as a brand new second officer on probation. And we were also interviewed by Ebony Magazine. I'll tell you that story because that's kind of fun. But, um, the country is very divided, and I thought about should I do this or not? Are people going to get ticked off or stuff like that? I decided it's a story I want to tell because that's an interesting story. But let me tell you a little bit about my background with prejudice. Okay, you see, I'm a white guy, so, I don't have a lot to talk about. But let me tell you a little bit about my background. You can take this for what it's worth. You can stop the video right now, whatever. Do whatever you want. But I wanted to tell the story. So here it goes. Okay, I grew up in Iowa. Iowa City, actually. Iowa City, Iowa. Went to the University of Iowa there. Now, it was a college town, so it's a little different than kind of normal Iowa, with the farmers and stuff like that. But where I grew up, we had our Catholic parochial school that I went to. We had St. Patrick's and we had Regina High School. Now, we had our two families. I don't have a picture of my grade school because the church was hit by a tornado and they sold the whole property off. They tore down the school and it's all gone. And I don't have any pictures of it, unfortunately. But we had our black family, the Hudsons, and we had our Hispanic family, the Rios. And we as kids never thought anything about it. They were black, they were Hispanic, they were kids. It didn't matter to us, and we didn't notice any prejudice as such. The prejudice that existed at the time, and this exists in parochial schools or probably any organization that depends a lot on people making contributions, because the parochial schools depended upon that. So if you were rich, you were treated very well. If you were not rich, you were treated very poorly. Well, I didn't see this a whole bunch growing up in grade school because, it wasn't terribly obvious then. But as I got into high school, it became much more apparent. In fact, my dad even made the comment that Reverend Sowen's virtually genuflected in front of the rich people. And that's when I really started to notice it. I think that's when you probably became more aware of just the structure. Now, obviously, if you had money and influence, you were favored, and if you didn't, you weren't. Well, I could understand that. It taught me a very important lesson that having money or position was very important, and I should do something about that. Now, back in grade school, I wanted to be a scientist, and the nun said, "Well, who do you think you are? You're the fireman's son. You'll be lucky to be a gas station attendant." And okay, for you people not aware of this is back when the days when you pulled into a gas station, a guy comes out, he puts the gasoline in your car, and he cleans your windshield. Well, that was the most I could expect out of life because I wasn't one of the chosen few. All right. And I remember I had friends who were, their dads were doctors, their dads were bankers and stuff like that. And we were just kids and we were friends. But I could really see the difference in how they were treated. In fact, there was a special event at school. I was with one of my friends. It was, food, snacks, soft drinks, hard drinks for the alcohol. And my friend was going into it, and he invites me in, and I'm following him, and I get stopped at the door because I'm not the chosen. Okay, well, like I said, I could deal with the fact that I was poor and disfavored. If I had to deal with the fact that the color of my skin made a difference, that would have been something that is like, well, how do you handle that? Well, okay. So basically, what I saw in grade school, high school, and even in college, being a university town, I wasn't terribly aware of racism, even in Iowa. Now, I go into the Air Force, and we had a black classmate in my class, Ron. He was like one of the normal guys. Okay, that's fine. Didn't think anything about it, and I don't think it stands out that much in necessarily officers, especially pilots. But as I became an instructor, I became slightly more aware of it. It became more of an issue, and there was more of a concern on bringing minorities in. And we had a black student who um, complained that he was being treated prejudicially. Well, okay. I knew the instructor. I knew that wasn't true. But what they did was, okay, he pulled the race card, so he got extra lessons and stuff. Well, you can't fool the airplane. The airplane knows if you can fly or not. And when you're up there just by yourself, uh, you know, you're not going to make it. Now, in this day with simulators and stuff where you can go back and replay the whole thing and say, yeah, it's obvious this guy couldn't fly. It's pretty, to use the term, black and white, more so. So it's a lot harder to say that you're being discriminated against when you can make a clear case that, yeah, this person simply can't fly. So I'm out in the Air Force at Edwards, and the test ops commander happened to be black and interracial marriage, and Colonel Manley was just a super guy, great pilot, great fun to fly with. So still, I'm not seeing any issues. Well, then I come to United Airlines, and this is the book that Bill wrote. And United Airlines had a terrible history of prejudicial hiring. There's just no way around it. They're trying to make up for it now. And okay, you might, are we going to be hiring a bunch of minorities that are unqualified, and yeah, I probably shouldn't get into this, but no, I don't think so. You still have to meet the standards. You still have to do it. You might entice more people to apply, but if you can't cut the mustard, you can't do it. Now, Bill is a consummate gentleman. And he told me stories, and they're not in the book, which kind of surprised me. But Bill is quite a guy. He is a gentleman. He is smooth. He is intelligent. He's a good pilot, and he's done a lot of great things. And he's got a lot of nice commentations. His wife's a hoot too. One time they were at the this was back when the airlines used to actually celebrate that you had been a pilot for a while, and when you got 25 years with the company, they actually had a dinner for you. And Bill was there, and his wife was going into the restroom, and one of the women saw a fairly good sized ring, I guess, on her finger, and they said, "Is that real?" And she responded, "Honey, everything I have is real." But Bill kind of went over, in my opinion, glossed over some of the details about how egregious United was in their practices. He told me stories about how a black pilot would show up 3,000 hours of KC-135 time, and they'd tell him they weren't hiring janitors that day. Okay. I got hired with 1,500 hours. So the guy said, "No, I'm here for a pilot slot." Well, he goes in the back room, comes back out and says, "Well, you're just not qualified." So, United wasn't even subtle about it in the early days. And they had lawsuits that required him to hire at higher rates because they had been bad in the back. If you make it so obvious that you're screwing up, you're going to get punished. And Bill I felt kind of glossed over that. He was trying to be a gentleman. Now, you get captains that you fly with that you say, "I am never going to be like this guy." And it's a good experience to fly with them because it teaches you how not to be a captain. And Bill was one of the first captains I came across as a brand new hire on probation. And he was the type of captain I wanted to be. He was in command. He was a gentleman. He handled issues very well. And during the month that we were flying together, he had recently upgraded to captain. And Ebony Magazine came out and they did an interview. And they actually came into the cockpit when we had a stopover in Chicago and they took a bunch of pictures. And so, probably in some Ebony Magazine, I may have the picture of the back of my head in there because I was sitting at the second officers panel. And after they left, it was me, who's obviously white, and a white co-pilot. And after they left, I leaned forward. Bill had a good sense of humor, and I said, "Bill, uh, what'd you say about us?" And he goes, "What do you mean? What did I say about you?" And I said, "Well, did you tell the reporter there that we did a good job for being a couple of white guys?" And Bill had a good laugh about that. But we had a good month together. He taught me a lot, and I noticed we would have new, very young black pilots that would come in on the jump seat or that. And Bill took him aside and he says, it's not just you. Everybody who looks at you is looking at a black pilot, and you have a reputation to uphold. He said, so your role is important. You've got to think of more than just yourself. So he was quite a mentor to new pilots, and he was quite a mentor to me as a new pilot. Well, if you've been to the Chicago Science and Industry Museum, you may have seen this airplane. And it's got Bill's name on it because Bill flew it. I actually flew this airplane also. In fact, a couple of months before it was going to go into the museum, I'm flying it. And I almost made an announcement to the people that, hey, you're flying on a museum piece here. And I thought, nah, people probably don't like to hear that. But it's got a very nice, prominent place in the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, and I don't think the skin of that aircraft ever looked that shiny and beautiful, even when it was new. Here's another picture of it hanging. It's kind of neat. It's hanging in kind of a flight position, which is cool. And another slightly different view. And the view where you can walk in and actually get a nice view of the airplane. The interior there. They made the door just a bit wider. You can actually sit in the engines, which is something you really, really don't want to do. Um, at least when they're operating. But anyway, you can go in there, you can see this airplane, and it's dedicated to Bill because he flew it, and he was the first black pilot hired by United Airlines, and he makes it sound a little bit easier in the story, like United's kind of got their act together, but really they didn't. And one other thing I would like to mention. You may have seen this arrival of the 727 coming into Meigs Airfield. And yeah, Meigs is a short airfield, but they're coming in on flaps 40. And the guy really pranks it. I mean, he admits it. It's wonderful to have your landing on national TV. You could have taken Bill or just about any experienced 727 pilot and he would have greased it on there. So this is a case where test pilots aren't quite as good as the airline pilots. That's one thing I got to hand it to it. The airline pilots I flew with, especially when I was new, I was really impressed with their airmanship and how good they were and just what a good job they could do flying. All right, so that's my comments about a little bit of racism issues at United Airlines in my experience coming up through the Air Force. And okay, I've flown with a lot of black pilots, people of color, female pilots, minorities, and I don't see where the standards have been decreased for anybody. And I wouldn't accept it, and I don't think anybody in the training program would accept it. You can't fool the airplane. If you can't fly, it's going to be quite apparent. And you might be surprised, but people do get fired from the airlines. It's not as hard as you would think, even with the union representation. Now, one of the things you have to be a good pilot. If you're not a good pilot, you're going to have problems. You may slip by a few times, but it's eventually going to come up and get you. The other thing is you've got to get along with your fellow crew members. And I had a second officer who had been a T-37 instructor in the Air Force like me, and I flew with him. And the guy was from New York, okay? He was a little bit brisk in that, but he was a good guy. Unfortunately, in a training event, he got crossways with the instructor, and he ended up getting fired. He called me up because we had flown together for a month, and I made a case to the vice president of flight operations. We knew each other because I was doing a lot of flight test work, and so I knew him on a personal basis. And I talked to him about it, and it was basically, hey, we can't have guys who don't get along with other crew members, and I tried, but it didn't work. But anyway, I've rambled enough. That's my story. I hope you found it interesting, informative, or whatever. Thanks for viewing.